Hey guys, today I wanted to fill in the 2020 Senate map based solely on polling data. So yesterday I talked about the 2020 presidential race based only on the polling data that has come out recently, and today I'll be doing the same thing based on for the Senate races. So the Republicans currently do have control of the Senate. They have 53 seats, the Democrats with 47, and they also have more seats up for re-election. They have 23 to the Democrats with 12. So that's why on this mapping, Democrats start off with 35 and the Republicans start off with 30. So these yellow states here, these are the states where there is no data, basically no polling data has come out of these states recently, and I am going to be using 538 just because I think that they do a very good job with their polling averages. They choose very good pollsters to use, and they are pretty accurate. However, RCP is very conservative with giving states to either party, so I'm actually not going to be using their Senate map just because they tend to underestimate the winning party in basically every single state, which is why there's only 2-3 safe seats for either party on the RCP map. So first I'm just going to fill in these no data states. The reason why there's no data is just because they're very safe for either party. So for the Democrats, these are the states of Oregon, Minnesota, Illinois, Virginia, Delaware, and Rhode Island. These states are all very safe for the Democrats, so there's really no data out of these states. The states are all going to go to the Democratic incumbent. And the only exception to this is the state of Colorado. I think Colorado will be a lean state for the Democrats. It is currently held by a Republican Senator, Cory Gardner. He was elected in 2014, and he is currently facing a very tough re-election against John Hickenlooper. John Hickenlooper is a very popular governor from the state of Colorado, and he is expected to flip this state, so it will be a likely seat for the Democrats. This is the only exception out of these no data states, and of course the rest of these states, these are all Republican states, very conservative states in these areas. They are all going to go to the GOP, and there's no polling data out of these. There are other safe Democratic and Republican states. However, these are just the states in which there is no data from. So the first state we're going to look at is the state of Massachusetts. Massachusetts is a very safe Democratic state on both the presidential and Senate levels. On the presidential level, Biden leads by over 30 points in this state, but on the Senate level, there is a hotly contested Democratic Senate primary here. So these are not the actual polls for the general Senate election. These are only the polls for the Democratic primary. So basically, Ed Merkley is the incumbent in the state of Massachusetts. He is a Democrat. However, he is facing a very tough Democratic primary challenge from Joe Kennedy III. Yes, he is related to John F. Kennedy and Bobby Kennedy, so he is pulling ahead of Ed Merkley in this state, and he is expected to win the primary as well as the Senate seat. So I'm going to fill in the state of Massachusetts for Joe Kennedy III, and the Democrats, making them go up to 43 seats, the Republicans with 40. And next is the state of New Jersey. This seat is currently held by Cory Booker. His Republican challenger really has no chance of winning the state. Cory Booker, pretty popular in the state of New Jersey, so he is going to retain his seat in the state of New Jersey. And next is the state of New Mexico. Currently, there is no incumbent out of this state. However, Ben Ray Lujan is expected to win. He's up 14 points in the polls. New Mexico is becoming more and more of a left-leaning state. He is actually polling better than Joe Biden in the state, so he is widely expected to carry the Senate seat in the state of New Mexico. I think that a likely margin is the most likely for Ben Ray Lujan. And next is the seat in the state of New Hampshire. Typically, this would be a very contested seat. New Hampshire is a left-leaning state. However, it is not too left-leaning. The Republicans do tend to pose a good challenge in the state. However, Jeanne Shaheen really does not have any strong Republican challengers. As you can see here, she's demolishing both of them in the polls. So I think that it will be actually a safe seat for Jeanne Shaheen in the state of New Hampshire. And next is the state of Alabama. This is honestly the only vulnerable Democratic seat held by Doug Jones at the moment. He is the Democratic incumbent. He won in a special election in 2018, I believe, and he is polling behind Republican challenger Tommy Tuberville. He is, of course, a former football coach at Ashburn University, I believe, and he is expected to flip the seat for the Republicans in the state of Alabama, this being the first flip for the Republicans, and in my opinion, the only flip for the Republicans. So I think it will be a likely margin for the GOP in the state of Alabama. Next is the state of Michigan. I think Michigan, this is not a vulnerable seat for the Democrats. However, I think this will be the seat in which they have the smallest margin of victory for and Democratic incumbent. Gary Peters is the incumbent. His Republican challenger is John James, and John James is polling significantly behind Peters at the moment. He's down 8 points, so I think a likely margin for the Democrat is very likely in the state of Michigan. And then after this, we have the state of Kentucky. This is Mitch McConnell's seat. He is a very unpopular senator from the state of Kentucky. He is the second most unpopular senator behind Susan Collins at the moment. However, he does lead over his Democratic challenger, Amy McGrath. I think Amy McGrath is really not a very inspiring candidate, and I really don't think she's going to be able to get people to vote for her out of the state of Kentucky. Mitch McConnell, although being very unpopular, he has always been unpopular, so this is nothing new. He has won all of his re-elections. He was first elected in 1986, I believe, so he's very likely to retain his seat, and as you can see up here, he won his last election by 15 points, despite being the most unpopular senator at the time. So the state of Kentucky, I think, will be a lean state for Mitch McConnell. Even though he only wins by 5%, I think he will actually win it by a larger margin. Next is the state of Mississippi. Cindy Hyde-Smith versus Mike Espy. Cindy Hyde-Smith does have a 10-point lead. Mississippi, a very traditionally Republican state, so I think a likely margin for Cindy Hyde-Smith in the state of Mississippi. Next is the state of Alaska. Dan Sullivan does lead over Al Gross. Al Gross is not a Democrat. He is an independent in the state of Alaska. They do not really have a Democratic Party there. They do things a little differently in the state of Alaska. However, Dan Sullivan, the Republican incumbent, does lead by 5 points in this race, so I will categorize it as a lean Republican state. So this puts the Democrats at 47 and the Republicans at 44. In these next few states, I think these are probably the most important states. With the exception of Texas, I forgot about Texas. Texas currently leans towards John Cornyn, the Republican incumbent. MJ Hegar really is not expected to win this seat. The state of Texas might be going more and more towards the left on the presidential level, with Joe Biden having led in the state multiple times this election cycle. In the Senate level, John Cornyn is still expected to retain his Senate seat. He's up 10 points. He is mildly popular in his home state, so I think he will definitely retain his home state with a likely margin. So now we have the really contested Senate seats. These being the seats in the states of Montana, Arizona, Iowa, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, and Maine. So first, in the state of Arizona, Martha McSally versus Mark Kelly. Martha McSally became a senator from the state of Arizona after the passing of John McCain. However, Mark Kelly does lead over Martha McSally by 7 points on average. I think Martha McSally really is not a good candidate. She actually lost her Senate race, I believe, a couple of years ago. So having a loser go up against Mark Kelly, I really do not think that was too smart for the Republicans. She is expected to lose her Senate seat, and this is a flip for the Democrats, so a likely margin for Mark Kelly as he leads by 7 points. Next is the state of Montana. Currently, Steve Daines is actually leading in this state. Steve Bullock is actually now behind of Steve Daines. I still think that Steve Bullock is going to win his Senate seat. He's going to win the Montana Senate seat, so unseating the Republican incumbent Steve Daines. However, Steve Daines does lead in the polls right now, so I will give it to him, a tilt margin for Steve Daines and the GOP in the state of Montana. Next is the state of Iowa. This is the race between Teresa Greenfield, the Democrat, and Republican incumbent Joni Ernst. Joni Ernst is actually polling behind Greenfield at the moment. She trails Greenfield by 0.3% on average, so I will give it to Greenfield. I think it'll be a very tight race here in the Iowa Senate race. However, I do think that Teresa Greenfield does have an edge in this race. So the state of Iowa, a tilt state for the Democrats. And next is the state of Maine, Susan Collins versus Sarah Gideon. I think this is probably the most interesting race, just because Susan Collins was previously the most popular senator in the entire country. She is now the most unpopular senator in the entire country. She is less popular within the state of Maine than Mitch McConnell is in the state of Kentucky. So she is, losing in her state at the moment. She is down 4.4 points under Sarah Gideon. And if you look at here, her electoral history, she won her 2014 race by 37 points, and her 2008 race by 23 points against her Democratic challengers. So it's very surprising to see that she is expected to lose her seat at the moment. I think that she is very vulnerable. However, I do think that Susan Collins can still win back her seat. So currently, I will give the state of Maine to Sarah Gideon with a with a lean margin. So this does put the Democrats at 50. So if Joe Biden wins the election, and I do expect him to win the presidential election, his vice presidential candidate, whoever it will be, will almost always tie break for the Democrats. So if the Democrats win, they would have control of the Senate necessarily. And next is the state of South Carolina, Lindsey Graham versus Jamie Harrison. Lindsey Graham, a very well-known Republican name. He currently leads by 8 points. However, the recent Quinnipiac poll shows him with a tie with Jamie Harrison. Jamie Harrison has greatly outraised Lindsey Graham, one of the most expensive Senate races in history. However, Lindsey Graham does have an 8-point lead, so I'm just going to give it to him as a likely state for the Republicans. We have 3 more states to go. First being the state of North Carolina between Republican incumbent Thom Tillis and Democratic challenger Cal Cunningham. Cal Cunningham, as you can see here, had a giant boost in the polls in late July. He is now up 9.5 points. Definitely going to go to the Democrats at this point in time based on the polling data. So definitely a likely state for the Democratic Party. And next, we have the 2 Senate races out of the state of Georgia. First, this is the normal Georgia Senate race between Republican incumbent David Perdue and Democratic challenger Jon Ossoff. David Perdue currently does have a 4.2% lead over Jon Ossoff, so he is expected to win. However, I think it will be a pretty close race here in the state of Georgia for incumbent Perdue. So, Georgia race will be a lean race for the Republicans. And lastly, we have the Georgia special election between Kelly Loeffler and Collins in the state of Georgia. Loeffler became a senator this year, I believe, after the old senator decided that he was no longer fit for office, I believe, which is why Loeffler did become the senator. She is actually leading over Collins at the moment, so I will give it to her with a tilt margin at the moment. And looking at our 2020 Senate map now, the Democrats have won control of the Senate. They have 51 seats, the Republicans with 47. So even if Donald Trump wins his re-election race, according to the polls, the Democrats would retake control of the Senate, and they're also expected to take control of the House, which means they would control Congress in 2020. So if you enjoyed this video, please consider leaving a like on this video. I know this was a little rushed, but I'm just a little rushed at the moment, and I will see you in the next video.